actual solar energy, not with solar cells, but with heat. I brought in the people from Israel who are really the people who came up with those mirrors that shine onto a central tower that eats up a salt column, to heat up and to produce electricity. So all this now is already being done in China. You see the solar locations. We are not even talking anymore in megawatt. We are talking in gigawatt that they are producing. So I think there China also has been pretty okay. They had some quality issues in the past, but I think now in terms of quality, China is doing very well. And they are crushing all the industries around the world.
Very competitive, I say.
Very competitive, yes.
Thank you, Gilbert. Thank you for speaking.
Welcome. Welcome, sir. Yes.
What's behind the next door? What motivates us to find the truth? To understand the world, we must see it from different angles. Never stop searching. Go deeper. Go further. Be open-minded. Be engaged. Open the door through dialogue, where ideas do matter.
Welcome to The World Today here on CGTN. I'm Li Qiuyuan, joining you live from Beijing. Our top story this hour, China has strongly criticized recent moves by Japan to expand its military, warning of the resurrection of militarism in the country. It follows a statement by Japan's UN envoy insisting the country's defense policy is exclusively defense-oriented. Our Zhao Yunfei reports from Beijing.
Here at the Chinese Foreign Ministry, China once again calls on the Japan side to clearly state that what is its statement and position on the Taiwan question. Here, the Chinese Foreign Ministry, the spokesperson Lin Jian says that Japan has always been vague when it comes to Taiwan. He cited the UN Charter that when it comes to international relationship, the member states should not use threat. But clearly, the Japanese Prime Minister Takaichi's statement is a threat, citing an excuse of survival situation. Taiwan is part of China. It's part of the international order and the post-World War II order. This year marks the 80th anniversary of the victory in the Chinese People's War of Resistance against Japanese aggression. Spokesperson Lin Jian urged the international community to stay alert of the re-emergence of militarism.
Japan has step-by-step hollowed out the provisions explicitly set forth for Japan in the Cairo Declaration and the Potsdam Declaration, and betrayed its own commitments under the Japanese constitution. It is Japan itself that is expanding its military power, coercing other countries and ignoring the opposition of neighbouring nations in an attempt to unilaterally change the status quo. China firmly opposes Japan's retrogressive actions that challenge the post-war international order and its attempts to resurrect militarism.
Japan's opposition leaders are piling pressure on Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi, demanding her to retract her remarks on Taiwan. Satoshi Hanjo of the Constitutional Democratic Party said Takaichi's comments showed a poor grasp of what legally constitutes a so-called survival-threatening situation and strayed from Japanese law and decades of government positions. Taku Yamazoe of the Japanese Communist Party said the remarks are unconstitutional and extremely dangerous. He said they contradict Japan's recognition of Taiwan being part of China. Akiko Oishi of Reiwa Shinsengumi Party also blasted the remarks as groundless, urging the public to stay calm and not be provoked. Russian President Vladimir Putin will meet U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff in Moscow on Tuesday, as Washington signals optimism on reaching a deal over the Ukraine conflict. Putin's Special Envoy Kirill Dmitriev says Witkoff's team will advance Trump's peace agenda in Ukraine. The meeting follows 2 days of talks in Florida between Ukrainian and U.S. officials, including Witkoff, aimed at refining a U.S.-backed peace plan. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says the discussions were constructive, but tough issues still remain. Washington says the draft peace plan has been refined, but European leaders stress that no deal can be finalized without input from Ukraine and its European allies. This comes amid intensified fighting on the ground, and our correspondent Evangelos Sipsas reports from Kyiv.
The battlefield matters a lot. The battlefield matters a lot because there has been a number, actually, of, as Russia says, gains on the battlefield. They mentioned overnight that they were able to take the city of Pokrovsk, which is a very logistical hub in Ukraine. Ukraine says, of course, that has not happened. It is this communication battle that is taking place on the field. Of course, this puts a lot of pressure on both sides, but what Russia is expecting here to do is to put more pressure on Ukraine when it comes to the battlefield, to be able to sit down and meet its demands. And that is something, of course, that is happening because Steve Witkoff is there at the moment in Moscow meeting Vladimir Putin. So they believe that these gains on the battlefield would put more pressure to meet the maximalistic demands of Putin towards Steve Witkoff in the meeting between the two in Moscow. These, of course, what Kyiv is looking for, this is not to bend. As they say, we're not going to bend over this big fundamentals that we have because of what is happening on the battlefield. Of course, it is putting a lot of pressure of how this would lead, how the negotiations will take place. But again, Ukraine is saying that we're waiting for Washington to come back to us to see what will happen in that meeting, so we can be able to sit down and then make sure that if peace does come in the country, then we'll be able to, it will be a doable peace plan, and it will be something that Ukraine has put in the beginning, those red lines that will not be crossed, meaning that security guarantees and no territory will be given to Russia. And it's very important here to point out, because they're concerned that if this meeting is not in the way they want it to be, then this could be a temporary pause, rearm. Russia would be able to regroup and become stronger afterwards on the battlefield.
In other news, Republic of Korea President Lee Jae-myung has proposed restoring channels of communication with the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Lee made the remarks at the inauguration ceremony of the 22nd Peaceful Unification Advisory Council, which advises the ROK president on unification issues. Lee said reviving the inter-Korean dialogue will be the starting point for new inter-Korean relations of peaceful coexistence. He also emphasized continued efforts to end the state of war on the peninsula, pursue a nuclear-free peninsula, and establish lasting peace. The 1950 to 1953 Korean War ended with an armistice and not a peace treaty, leaving the peninsula technically in a state of war ever since. And elsewhere, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has said he would never agree to what he calls, quote, a slave's peace, while denouncing U.S. military actions as aggression and psychological terror. Over 80 people have been killed in recent U.S. strikes on targets in the Caribbean, amid reports U.S. President Donald Trump has demanded that Maduro step down. And South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has dismissed a threat from U.S. President Donald Trump to exclude Pretoria from next year's G20 summit. Ramaphosa called the remarks baseless, reaffirming that South Africa as a founding member of the group. Take a listen.
A few days ago, President Donald Trump made a statement to the effect that South Africa would not be invited to participate in the G20 in the United States. He repeated untrue statements about genocide against Afrikaners and the confiscation of land from white people in our country. We must make it clear that South Africa is one of the founding members of the G20, and South Africa is therefore a member of the G20 in its own name and right. We will continue to participate as a full, active and constructive member of the G20. Despite the challenges and misunderstandings that have arisen between South Africa and the United States, South Africa remains a firm and
Ramaphosa made these comments in a national address, and this comes after South Africa presided over November's G20 Leaders Summit, which Washington chose not to attend. Ramaphosa called the U.S. absence, which was based on what he called misinformation, regrettable. President Trump had cited allegations of white genocide in South Africa as his reason for skipping the meeting. And despite the ongoing tensions, South Africa has now formally handed over the G20 presidency to the United States for 2026, in line with diplomatic protocol. Ramaphosa stressed that Pretoria values its relationship with Washington and remains committed to dialogue. The Boa Forum for Asia has wrapped up its regional meeting in Saudi Arabia. It is Riyadh's second consecutive year to host the meeting. CGTN's Adel Maroui talked to the CEO of Saudi petrochemical giant SABIC, who praised the forum's role in strengthening cooperation with China.
So how is it significant for Saudi Arabia to host it for the second consecutive year now?
Yeah, first of all, I think it's an opportunity for our Asian partners to come and to see what is in Saudi Arabia. There is a lot of opportunity that will attract. It is one of the largest growth in terms of GDP, in addition to the opportunities that so many opportunities in all aspects, in building and constructions, in healthcare, and electronics, in all the sectors that it is available for them to invest here, as well as also it will give an opportunity for a partnership, because this is what most important thing is, the partnership between the Asian, mainly Chinese, and the Saudi leaders.
How do you evaluate the China-Saudi Arabia trade and commercial cooperation? And can you assess SABIC's investments and partnership with the Chinese counterpart?
SABIC has entered into the China market for more than 30 years. And we were one of the first global pioneers that we have entered into the market. So entered in China market as product distributors for many years. But this has been evolving into providing solutions and technological solutions into the challenges that the industry is facing. So we partner with Sinopec in Tianjin for one of the most and largest petrochemical complex in Tianjin. Now also we are under construction of also another one of the largest petrochemical complex in Fujian. In the Fujian, there is about 16 units, 12 new technologies. Out of these 12 technologies, 9 is provided by SABIC. It is joint knowledge, joint technology, joint innovation in the solution that we are providing to the market.
How do you view China's recent economic policies and broader business environment? And in what ways is China a priority for SABIC's investment?
Actually, look, in terms of priorities, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is a priority for us in terms of investment. Second, we are a global company that we look where is the opportunity that we can find, and we found that the Asia is the largest growth region that we need to have focus on. And in China, we are part of it. We are part of the China economy. We are part of the China. And we have seen that a lot of policies in the China has been evolved, has been improving in the last decade.
That's going to do it for this hour's World Today here on CGTN. Thank you so much for watching. Coming up next is China 24. I'll see you soon. Hey, coming to you from Beijing, this is China 24, a look at China and its impact around the world. I'm Li Qiuyuan. Let's get started. Coming up, Beijing warns Tokyo's efforts to expand its military are a betrayal of Japan's pacifist constitution. China unveils a plan to boost the commercial space sector and international cooperation. Plus, we speak with former senior officials and scholars ahead of French President Emmanuel Macron's visit to China. Our top story, Chinese President Xi Jinping has extended congratulations to Thong Loon Sithalis, General Secretary of the Lao People's Revolutionary Party Central Committee and President of the Lao People's Democratic Republic, on the 50th anniversary of the country's founding. President Xi expressed belief that Laos can follow a socialist path that suits its national conditions and break new ground in the cause of party and country construction. He also said China always prioritizes Laos in its neighborhood diplomacy. China aims to carry forward their traditional friendship, strengthen unity and cooperation, and promote their comprehensive strategic cooperation and bring more benefits to the two peoples and make greater contributions to peace and development in the region and the world. Meanwhile, China strongly criticized recent moves by Japan to expand its military. Beijing says the move is a betrayal of Japan's pacifist constitution and could resurrect militarism in the country. Zhao Yunfei reports from Beijing.
Here at the Chinese Foreign Ministry, China once again calls on the Japan side to clearly state that what is its statement and position on the Taiwan question. Here, the Chinese Foreign Ministry, the spokesperson Lin Jian says that Japan has always been vague when it comes to Taiwan. He cited the UN Charter that when it comes to international relationship, the member states should not use threat. But clearly, the Japanese Prime Minister Takaichi's statement is a threat, citing an excuse of survival situation. Taiwan is part of China. It's part of the international order and the post-World War II order. This year marks the 80th anniversary of the victory in the Chinese People's War of Resistance against Japanese aggression. Spokesperson Lin Jian urged the international community to stay alert of the re-emergence of militarism.
Japan has step-by-step hollowed out the provisions explicitly set forth for Japan in the Cairo Declaration and the Potsdam Declaration, and betrayed its own commitments under the Japanese constitution. It is Japan itself that is expanding its military power, coercing other countries, and ignoring the opposition of neighbouring nations in an attempt to unilaterally change the status quo. China firmly opposes Japan's retrogressive actions that challenge the post-war international order and its attempts to resurrect militarism.
China's permanent representative to the UN, Fu Song, says China firmly opposes Japan's latest letter to the United Nations, accusing Tokyo of evading key issues and attempting to shift blame. Here are the details.
China's permanent representative to the UN, Fu Song, has delivered another letter to UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, rejecting Japan's arguments over Taiwan as unreasonable and reiterating China's position on the Taiwan question. Fu said the direct cause of the current differences between China and Japan is Prime Minister Sana Takaichi's provocative remarks that implied Japan would militarily intervene in the Taiwan question. Fu's letter comes after his Japanese counterpart Kazuki Yamazaki sent a letter to the UN chief, saying Japan's position on issues concerning Taiwan is consistent. The Chinese envoy urged Japan to provide an explanation of its consistent position, citing multiple legally binding documents. Fu said Takaichi's remarks violate the commitments Japan has made. Fu reiterated that Taiwan is Chinese territory, and Takaichi's linkage of Japan's, quote, survival-threatening situation with the Taiwan contingency goes beyond its passive defense strategy. Regarding Yamazaki's insinuation at defense development of other countries, Fu said the international community must remain vigilant against Japan's ambitions to expand its military capabilities and revive militarism. He also said Takaichi's words and deeds have severely undermined mutual trust and damaged the political foundation of China-Japan ties. He urged Japan to demonstrate its sincerity with clear reaffirmation of the One China principle, immediate retraction of the erroneous remarks, and practical steps to honor its commitments to China.
Since its defeat in the Second World War, Japan has been bound to numerous international legal documents, including the Potsdam Proclamation and the Instrument of Surrender. Now, these documents have served as safeguards to prevent the rise of militarism in Japan. Wang Hao has more.
80 years ago, the Potsdam Proclamation delivered a clear and uncompromising message. It stressed the complete ousting of those in charge who deceived the people of Japan into embarking on a global war. Strict political constraints were placed to limit Japan's ability to wage war, including the removal of its ideological foundations of militarism. Japan is also restricted from exercising the right to collective self-defense as defined in its constitution. The concept was introduced in the UN Charter in 1945 and was created to safeguard collective security and prevent the resurgence of fascism. The four China-Japan political documents and Article 9 of Japan's pacifist constitution further underscore its commitment to peaceful development. In the 1972 Sino-Japanese joint statement, Japan explicitly expressed deep remorse for its wartime aggression and pledged to resolve disputes by peaceful means. The exclusively defense-oriented policy enshrined in Japan's constitution has served as a fundamental assurance of Japan's pursuit of peaceful development since the war. But in recent years, right-wing forces in Japan have increasingly challenged the core principles of its post-war pacifist trajectory. Proposals for armed intervention in the Taiwan Strait, talks on abandoning the three non-nuclear principles, and efforts to revise the pacifist constitution send a troubling signal suggesting Japan's departure from its long-standing commitment to peaceful development. Wang Hao, CGTN.
China's Coast Guard says it has expelled the Japanese fishing vessel that illegally entered waters of the Diaoyudao on Tuesday. Authorities say Chinese ships issued warnings and took necessary control measures before driving the vessel away. Beijing has reaffirmed the Diaoyudao as inherited territory and urged Japan to stop all provocative actions. Patrols will continue in the area to safeguard China's sovereignty and maritime rights. Meanwhile, over 40% of scheduled flights from China to Japan in December have been canceled, and that's about 1,900 flights. Chinese cruise operator Adora has adjusted its December itinerary to bypass several Japanese ports. It has also canceled all Japanese port calls for the first quarter of 2026. Recently, businesses across Japan have reported a significant drop in Chinese tourists, with group tours canceled and revenue declining. Industry insiders warn that if the situation persists through the Spring Festival holiday in February, the impact could escalate even further. Take a listen.
Ever since our hotel opened in 2018, we have relied heavily on guests from China. Even before gaining domestic recognition, Chinese visitors made up 20 to 30% of our customer base. The recent wave of cancellations is deeply concerning. For Okinawa's tourism industry, both group and individual travelers from China were highly anticipated. The current situation is really worrying.
Cruise tourism is vital for Okinawa. Our biggest concern is that if this continues into January and February next year, the impact could reach tens of thousands of people. These months are traditionally off-season here, and Chinese tourists are especially important to us during this period. If they stop coming, the blow to our business will be severe.
A recent survey in Japan shows that over 20,000 food items have seen price hikes this year. The number is up 60% compared to last year. The survey, conducted by Japan's Teikoku Data Bank, involved 195 major food and beverage producers across the country and inquired about their price adjustment plans this year. The data bank says the increase in food prices is related to rising costs of raw materials, energy, and labor. It also reflects Japan's recent core CPI, excluding fresh food, which rose by 3% year-on-year in October, marking the 50th consecutive month of year-on-year increase. Foods experiencing the greatest price hikes include rice, up 39.6%, chocolate, which rose 36.9%, and coffee beans, which jumped 53.4%. And you're now watching China 24. Let's now take a short break on the program. Coming up next. China's space agency unveils a new plan to boost the commercial space sector. Stay with us.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
You might think you are better informed in an information age. The fact is, people are more often misled by misinformation. You might think every voice is heard in a digital world. The fact is, many nations and peoples are still underrepresented. And data poverty shuts out many. We at CGTN are committed to transcending the information gap and the digital divide. CGTN, bridging nations and civilizations. CGTN, see the difference.
Hainan writes a new chapter in China's modernization with the launch of special customs operations from December 18th. Increasing tax-free tariff lines from 21% to 74%, ensuring the free cross-border flow of goods, people, and capital. Hainan is China's firm commitment to high standard opening up, to advance economic globalization and share opportunities for prosperity with the world. Join us for our special coverage of this historic milestone in Hainan's journey and China's continuing trade liberalization. Only on CGTN.
Welcome back. China's space agency has released a plan to back commercial space firms and encourage them to pursue international cooperation over the next 2 years. The document from the China National Space Administration invites the country's commercial space enterprises to go global and help developing countries build satellite application industries. The CNSA has also pledged to include commercial space projects in China's international cooperation agenda. China now has more than 600 commercial space companies. The recommendations for the country's 15th five-year plan, due to get underway in 2026, lists the aerospace sector among strategic emerging industries. The space agency's plan aims to achieve the high-quality development of commercial space by 2027. CGTN's Wang Hao has the latest.
Private enterprises have emerged as key players in China's space sector, driven by supportive government policies and institutional backing. The China National Space Administration has established a new department for commercial space operations to bolster this growth. It is the first government body of its kind focusing exclusively on commercial space activities. The administration has also released an action plan outlining key tasks by the end of 2027, aimed at fostering high-quality development in the commercial space industry. The plan integrates commercial space initiatives into the national space strategy and specifies 22 measures across 5 priority areas. It is targeted at enhancing innovation, optimizing resource allocation, promoting the usage of commercial space products, improving regulatory services, and strengthening safety oversight. Wang Hao, CGTN.
The Hainan Commercial Space Launch Site is China's first such facility dedicated to commercial space missions. Since 2016, 43 major missions have launched from the site, including lunar exploration missions and China's first interplanetary probe. The low-altitude location in Wenshan increases rocket payload capacity by 10 to 15%. Another advantage is the Hainan Free Trade Port's zero tariffs and low taxes, which have made the region highly attractive to aerospace enterprises. The space program is also driving a wave of tourism in Hainan. Rocket launches attract large crowds, and rocket chasing has become a new travel trend. The Wenchang Yaoguang rocket viewing platform enhances the experience through science education displays, exhibitions, performances, interactive activities, and local cuisine. And northwestern China's Xi'an plays a pivotal role in the country's development of space science and applications. The historical city has transformed into an aerospace hub, helping fuel China's space ambitions. Zheng Yibing reports.
Xi'an, an aviation and aerospace manufacturing base, is a good place to see the progress being made in China's commercial space industry. Let's start with the satellite companies there.
One satellite can play an important role, but the networking of satellites is no doubt very powerful.
This company is building a satellite constellation that will be used for environmental protection in the Qinling mountain area just south of Xi'an.
It's the range that divides North China from the south.
The company plans to manufacture more than 100 remote sensing satellites in the next 5 years.
This is a real-size model for the second phase of this constellation, which is based on a standardized design, fast upgrading, and low-cost operation, and weighs about 50 kilograms. We plan to have 20 of them in orbit before 2025, some 58 by 2028, and about 150 by 2030.
Another Xi'an-based company has been focusing on CubeSat, a microsatellite weighing as little as 1 kilogram.
It has distinct advantages because it's small and flexible and could be sent into space easily. There are examples of one rocket with more than 100 CubeSats on board. It's impossible for big satellites. We spend tens of thousands of yuan to send 1 kilogram of payload into space. So there's a big cost difference between the ones with weights of a ton or 10 kilograms.
The scientists said due to their size, CubeSats only have one function, like photography, for example, but in combination they can perform multiple tasks. The low-orbit constellation uses low-cost and high-efficiency rockets. New rocket engine companies have also emerged in Xi'an. This one provides support to both national missions and commercial operations. It developed the YF-102 engine, which was used to power the first Chinese-made commercial liquid-fuel rocket to reach orbit last year.
Now we know more about the market. We keep upgrading the engines. The YF-102 is not only based on our experiences, but also innovations, lower costs, and technologies that better meet the market needs. And the engines must have high cost performance. This will make rockets more competitive.
For commercial satellites in space, this place is really important. The ground facilities are doing the measurement and control over them.
We established a channel to receive the telemetry data from satellites in orbit and send commands to keep them working normally. This is a constant process, especially in the future when there will be a big increase in satellites.
After almost a decade of development, China's commercial space industry is set to be bracing for the next big step. Xi'an, for decades an aerospace manufacturing hub, is pushing the boundaries of innovation in China's commercial space sector. Zheng Yibing, CGTN in Xi'an, Shanxi Province.
Guangdong Province has emerged as a new hub for commercial space enterprises and talent in China. One key player is engineer Zhou Bin, a longtime advocate of the country's industry's development. Huang Fei reports from Guangzhou.
One of the fastest growing frontiers in commercial space is satellite internet, deploying vast constellations of low Earth orbit satellites to create a global network. Chief engineer Zhou Bin is leading the research. As a deputy of the country's top legislative body, he's pushing for greater policy support, having seen firsthand its impact.
While ground networks like 4G and 5G are highly developed, they still leave many areas uncovered. Mountains, deserts, oceans, even low-altitude airspace, from a few hundred meters to 3,000 meters above ground.
Satellite internet is crucial for today's digital economy. It powers offshore farms, keeps autonomous vehicles on course, and ensures communication in remote areas. China's mega constellations could see tens of thousands of satellites launched in the coming years, but production lags behind demand and costs remain high. Zhou Bin's team is working to close that gap.
Here's our terahertz receiver chip, built using CMOS technology for low-cost mass production. Next to it is our transmitter. Terahertz waves sit between microwaves and infrared. They offer high frequency, wide bandwidth, and are safer for humans, making them valuable for biomedical applications as well. We've completed tape-out testing. The next step is full-scale production.
Zhou Bin's team moved from research to near production in just 1 year, progress fueled by strong funding and a deep talent pool.
These researchers are among the brilliant minds behind the Greater Bay Area's growing space industry. But with the major gap between demand and production capacity, the challenge isn't just scaling up, it's producing highly reliable satellites at reasonable costs and standing out in a fiercely competitive global market. And achieving that will require both technological breakthroughs and strategic planning.
China is leveraging its strong manufacturing base and open business environment along the southern coast, with Guangdong aiming to build a 300 billion yuan commercial space sector by 2026, advancing key technologies like reusable heavy-lift rockets.
We'll increase financial, talent, and technological support to nurture key sectors like satellite and spacecraft manufacturing. This year, our goal is to introduce or cultivate 6 to 8 major enterprises and 3 to 5 industry parks, creating a full supply chain from rocket manufacturing to satellite operations.
Zhou Bin is looking beyond China, targeting markets along the maritime Silk Road, from Southeast Asia to the Middle East and North Africa. With cutting-edge tech, strategic investment, and a gateway to global markets through Hong Kong and Macau, the Greater Bay Area is reaching for the stars. CGTN, Guangzhou.
To expand on this a little bit, let me bring in Professor Zhang Fan, an Associate Professor of Astronomy at Beijing Normal University. Welcome to the program, as always, Professor. Now, the Hainan Space Launch Center is China's first dedicated commercial spaceport and has become a key industrial benchmark. What replicable lessons can be drawn from its success to optimize the national commercial space sector?
Right. So obviously there's a regulatory sandbox. So the taxes and everything that can possibly be replicated elsewhere as well. As a launch site, though, there are some unique advantages to the Hainan Island. It's basically geography. It's closer to the equator, so the rotation of Earth gives you a rocket extra fling. So its velocity increases. That saves some fuel. Also, the fact that you can launch in the southeasterly direction and over the ocean means the debris will fall into the ocean, so that's safer. And also, it's easily accessible by boat, which means rockets are long. You can't travel them by road. They can't turn, and they're wide. They can't go through railway tunnels either. So by boat is the most easy way. So Hainan has all three, and for the other clusters you mentioned in your leading piece, so probably they don't have those advantages, so they will probably be concentrating on manufacturing part of it. And for launch side, possibly launching straight in the ocean on a barge will probably be the optimal choice.
There are so many unique advantages to Hainan, as you mentioned earlier, but Hainan's rapid development has also coincided with the expansion of commercial space clusters across the country, right? How can China better connect technological innovation, policy support, and market demand to build comprehensiveness in the global commercial space market?
Right. So in terms of the commercial space industry, the comprehensiveness, competitiveness, it all comes down to cost reduction. So to realize things like space manufacturing, putting data centers up there, you need to put a lot of weight into orbit, and that means the launching cost really needs to come down. And to do that, the private companies, they would try radical new technologies in order to reduce costs, and that's highly risky. You want to give them as long a runway as possible so they can try, fail multiple times, and still be going. And for that to happen, the state sector needs to open up its test facilities, first of all. China has very extensive and really excellent testing facilities, and that's why Chinese state sector's space launches, the failure rate is so low. And if the private sector can leverage on that, so instead of learning from rockets exploding, which is really expensive, they can do testing and learn properly, then for the same amount of money, they can go a lot further. And also, you need to put more money into their coffer as well, and that means the space sector should solicit their bid for the national. For example, you mentioned in your leading piece, there's the internet constellation, and China is planning on doing that. So that should give them an extra boost in their viability as well.
Fascinating. Professor, thank you so much for sharing your insights and analysis with us. We really appreciate your time. You're now watching China 24. Coming up next on the program. We talked to former senior officials and scholars to discuss French President Emmanuel Macron's upcoming visit to China. Plus, Chinese blind box toys boost consumption in the U.S. ahead of the holiday season. Stay with us.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference. Facing the unknown is always difficult. In a world in turmoil, it's easy to lose orientation. But when the storms come, we have to see the possibilities. Reinvent. Find new opportunities. Discover a path forward. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. French President Emmanuel Macron will pay a state visit to China from Wednesday to Friday. And to explore the goals and expectations of this high-level engagement, CGTN has spoken with two former French prime ministers, a former senior trade official and a leading scholar.
This visit is something of a tradition. Every year, the French president wanted to go to China, and the Chinese president also comes regularly to France. They have much to discuss, especially as we look ahead to 2026, when France will chair the G7. That will certainly be one of the key topics. Naturally, the international situation will be central to their talks, particularly the future of multilateralism, which faces challenges today. Both France and China are committed to a multilateral approach, one that promotes peace and balanced global governance. There are also many bilateral issues to address, such as economic and cultural issues. This annual high-level dialogue is essential to advancing our shared projects and bringing our two countries closer together.
If we want to solve the world's main problems, we must have a multilateral approach. None of today's major issues can be solved by a single country. This desire to work together is the fundamental point of convergence between China and France.
We're in a moment of great global upheaval, with the balance of power shifting. China will naturally be a major power in the international system. So a new balance must be found, which requires statesmen with a long-term vision. I believe your president has such a vision.
As part of China-Europe space cooperation, France has received a lunar sample from China's Chang'e 5 moon mission. The handover marks a new milestone in international space collaboration. Scientists in Paris are preparing to analyze the fragment, and they hope it'll reveal clues about the moon's volcanic activity and the early evolution of the solar system. Sarah Coates reports from Paris.
Under lock and key at France's most prestigious university, this tiny fragment, barely a speck to the eye, is part of the 1.7 kilogram haul brought back from the moon by China's landmark mission in 2020. Estimated to be around 2 billion years old, it holds clues to a chapter of lunar history we've never seen before.
Because most of the lunar samples we had were very old, and we are basing our understanding of the surface of the moon. When you look at the moon, you have plenty of craters, and we use the age of the rocks to try to calibrate how many craters you have at different ages. Having these very young samples can really fill up the gap for young ages to get a much better chronology of the surface of the moon.
Inside these labs, preparations are underway to begin testing within weeks. Professor Moynier and his team are focusing on one of the moon's biggest mysteries.
And so my science has been to understand why the moon, which is so close to us, has no water, while the Earth is covered in water. And so all my research before was based on Apollo samples. And so what I want to do on this sample is look at my like water, hydrogen, volatile elements to try to understand better how the moon is formed.
The team will also compare this fragment with other lunar samples to map the moon's interior and reconstruct its volcanic timeline, data that could refine future lunar missions.
This rare handover isn't just about science. It signals growing collaboration between China and Europe when it comes to space exploration. Now, by handing over this very precious sample, China is showing that it's a major player in lunar science and diplomacy.
For France, it's a scientific win and a chance to make discoveries that could shape the future of planetary science.
I think because China and France, right now they have a very good connection and relationship between the two countries. So it is a good opportunity for our students to do such a research.
And while this type of exchange between China and France is a first, Professor Moynier hopes it's just the beginning of a long and prosperous relationship as the world prepares for a new space race, one built on collaboration rather than competition. Sarah Coates, CGTN, Paris.
Leading economists have predicted that China is likely to surpass the United States as the world's largest economy within the next 20 years. Business leaders and former diplomats gathered recently in Mexico to discuss the future of trade with China in North America. Frank Contreras reports from Mexico City.
China is a major global economic player. That's also true for China's role in the North American economy. But trade tensions from Washington are trickling south to Mexico, a country with strong economic ties to both the United States and China. Mexico is reviewing the possibility of raising import tariffs by 50% on goods from China and other nations that have no trade agreement with Mexico. Mexican diplomats and business leaders discussed this issue at a recent conference by the Mexican Council on International Affairs. China's ambassador to Mexico, Chen Daojiang, addressed those attending.
China always advocates for universally beneficial and inclusive economic globalization and opposes all forms of unilateralism, protectionism, and discriminatory and exclusionary measures.
Trade experts here urge Mexico's government to build a strategic integration plan with the United States that allows Mexico to continue developing economic cooperation with China.
This scenario appears to be the most pragmatic. We should seek a balance between the benefits of free trade with the US and Canada and attract technological and financial benefits from Asia.
Strong advice also came from audience members, including Mexico's former ambassador to China, Sergio Ley.
I would emphasize that Chinese companies coming to Mexico should partner with Mexican companies. This would reduce the perception and accusation of predatory capital.
The message here, Mexico's government must create a strategic and pragmatic approach that includes its two most important trading partners, the United States and China. Frank Contreras, CGTN, Mexico.
The 2025 Imperial Springs International Forum is being held Tuesday and Wednesday in Guangzhou in southern China's Guangdong province. Around 200 participants from 30 countries are attending, including 30 former heads of state or government, leaders of international organizations, and experts and scholars. They will discuss a wide range of topics related to global development. Our Jung Sung-woo has more.
The Imperial Springs International Forum aims to spark meaningful discussions on peace, economic growth, and cultural exchange, fostering mutual understanding and building consensus to strengthen global cooperation. The forum this year focused on 7 key topics, including recalibrating global governance, artificial intelligence, and the dynamics of green and low-carbon development. Former global leaders praised China for its leading role, particularly in technological innovation, addressing environmental challenges, and promoting sustainability.
Definitely China is on technological level the leader, definitely. So I think it's very important that China support also to the other country to reach them to the level that's appropriate to our goals, because unfortunately humanity is not reaching always the goals they are proclaimed, and hope that China will be one of the leaders.
For China is a big country, a very important country, so whatever important issue is in the world, I think people and countries look to China. China, I think, is a good example for achieving air and cleaner circumstances, environment, and I think this could be an example to the world.
The 7 topics will be explored across 4 parallel forums and 2 plenary sessions. Global governance is a key focus. During the plenary discussion, participants exchanged ideas on how to improve global governance.
You see, if you want a future vision, you need some vision. And the vision is missing globally, you know. I'm looking for European vision, I'm looking for American vision, but at present we just have the Chinese vision. And this is important that China does it, because then it's a draft program for discussions. And China has done this job and offered us this opportunity.
The forum has been held successfully 9 times since 2014, bringing together more than 200 foreign dignitaries and 600 experts, scholars, and business leaders to deepen mutual understanding between China and the rest of the world. Shen Song with CGTN, Guangzhou, Guangdong Province.
As the U.S. holiday season nears, there's one item that has become a hot commodity among shoppers, the Labubu doll. The popular Chinese toy continues to ring up sales and provide an economic boost to cities across the United States. Mark New reports from San Francisco.
Over the past 2 years, Pop Mart, makers of the Chinese plush toy Labubu, has opened up more than 140 stores and vending machines in the U.S. 2 have recently opened in San Francisco, like this one at Stonestown Galleria Shopping Mall. The Ozus are showing around friends visiting from Turkey, and Pop Mart was an important stop.
This is the first Labubu for her.
She is crazy about Labubu. She is crazy about Labubu, but we could just find the chance to come here.
Some shoppers think the Labubu craze is dropping off slightly, but they're still here buying other Pop Mart toys.
I'm kind of a collector, so I've always collected a little bit of everything, but I do think people are kind of moving a little bit on from the Labubu to kind of other Pop Mart stuff, but still within Pop Mart.
But retail experts say hard-to-get Labubu models are still fetching high prices in second-hand markets, and Pop Mart stores are still doing brisk business.
So it's gone really viral on TikTok. People post unboxing videos. It's, probably the most sought after toy, if you want to call it a toy, for the Christmas season this year.
San Francisco was slow to recover from the COVID pandemic. Stores and restaurants were left empty as many workers stayed home and worked remotely. That's why it was welcome news in October when Pop Mart held a grand opening for its second San Francisco store in the famed Union Square area. It's taken up residence in a space that had been vacant since 2019. At the new 2-story location, business was nonstop in the middle of the day on a weekday.
I probably have 10, and I used to buy them only on TikTok Shop, but I happened to walk past a little Pop Mart, and we said, let's try our luck, and we were successful.
Pretty nice. I already got a full set of this one, but I just wanted to get one more.
I think it's definitely helping, drive traffic to downtown, which we need on Powell Street. So many shops have closed, so it's nice to see this driving traffic back here.
Some store posts that they have Labubus, there's a line out the door. So there's a rabid following on social media, and when this is done, kind of like in whether it's strip malls or regular malls or whatever, everyone in that area is going to see the benefit of that, because there's people posting that they will drive an hour or two to go get a Labubu.
Carey says Labubu's blind box marketing concept has also caught on with other companies, ranging from Nike to Sephora to Lego. It's still providing excitement for new customers, too, who say that the idea of you don't know what you get until you open it does exceedingly well at getting you to come back for more. Mark Dew, CGTN, San Francisco.
And that's going to do it for this edition of China 24. As always, we'll welcome your thoughts and comments. Reach us at China24 at CGTN.com. We now want to leave you with views of nature from East China's Anhui province. I'm Li Qiuyuan in Beijing. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good one.
Hello and welcome to the latest weather update. I'm Tianyi. Well, over to China. And the majority of China experienced a drier than normal month of last November, and this dry weather pattern will continue as we head into the first 10 days of December. And few precipitation to be in the forecast over the next couple of days. Only a small patch of light rain is setting the stage here for parts of the southern portion. And with that in mind, we're looking at rather low minimum relative humidity level, particularly here for the majority of the northern portion. Many of them will experience the relative humidity level even less than 20% during the day, so please drink plenty of water to stay moist. And temperature-wise, under the influence of the cold wave, many of southern portion will experience the continuous drop for both Wednesday and Thursday, while here for the northern portion will probably begin to experience the rebound in the maximum temperatures from Wednesday onward, but still quite a lot of negative readings in the daytime highs for the majority of the northeast on Wednesday. Significant warming up is likely to develop across the region by the time we get into this weekend, and temperatures change will be quite sharp during a rather short period of time, so please be well prepared and dress up accordingly. And about business and travel, quite a lot of clear conditions for many major cities here up in the northern portion on Thursday, and a high of 6 here in the city of Beijing.
global outreach. French President Emmanuel Macron is set to begin a state visit to China for bilateral and multilateral talks. Village innovation. We visit a historic Chinese village that is boosting tourism by integrating modern technology for rural revitalization. Economic signals, and we take a closer look at U.S. Thanksgiving holiday retail data, a key economic indicator. It's good evening from Beijing and welcome to this edition of Global Business on CGTN. I'm Lily Lu. To China-France relations, where French President Emmanuel Macron will pay a state visit to China from Wednesday to Friday. And this will be his fourth state visit to China. Chinese President Xi Jinping is to hold talks with him to discuss bilateral relations and major international issues. China says it's ready to work with France to strengthen ties and deepen cooperation.
Amid an evolving international landscape fraught with turmoil, China is ready to work with France to take this visit as an opportunity to strengthen strategic communication, deepen pragmatic cooperation, advance closer multilateral coordination, and work for new progress in the China-France Comprehensive Strategic Partnership. By doing so, the two countries will contribute more to promoting the healthy and stable development of China-EU relations, upholding multilateralism, and safeguarding world peace, stability, and prosperity.
And explore the goals and expectations of this high-level engagement, CGTN has spoken with two former French prime ministers, a former senior trade official, and a leading scholar.
This visit is something of a tradition. Every year, the French president wanted to go to China, and the Chinese president also comes regularly to France. They have much to discuss, especially as we look ahead to 2026, when France will chair the G7. That will certainly be one of the key topics. Naturally, the international situation will be central to their talks, particularly the future of multilateralism, which faces challenges today. Both France and China are committed to a multilateral approach, one that promotes peace and balanced global governance. There are also many bilateral issues to address, such as economic and cultural issues. This annual high-level dialogue is essential to advancing our shared projects and bringing our two countries closer together.
If we want to solve the world's main problems, we must have a multilateral approach. None of today's major issues can be solved by a single country. This desire to work together is the fundamental point of convergence between China and France.
We're in a moment of great global upheaval, with the balance of power shifting. China will naturally be a major power in the international system. So a new balance must be found, which requires statesmen with a long-term vision. I believe your president has such a vision.
China and France are deepening ties in space cooperation as France has received a lunar sample from China's Chang'e 5 moon mission. Scientists in Paris hope that it's just the beginning of a long and prosperous relationship. Sarah Coates reports from Paris.
Under lock and key at France's most prestigious university, this tiny fragment, barely a speck to the eye, is part of the 1.7 kilogram haul brought back from the moon by China's landmark mission in 2020. Estimated to be around 2 billion years old, it holds clues to a chapter of lunar history we've never seen before.
Because most of the lunar samples we had were very old, and we are basing our understanding of the surface of the moon. When you look at the moon, you have plenty of craters, and we use the age of the rocks to try to calibrate how many craters you have at different ages. I think these very young samples can really fill up the gap for young ages to get a much better chronology of the surface of the moon.
Inside these labs, preparations are underway to begin testing within weeks. Professor Moynier and his team are focusing on one of the moon's biggest mysteries.
And so my science has been to understand why the moon, which is so close to us, has no water, while the Earth is covered in water. And so all my research before was based on Apollo samples. And so what I want to do on this sample is look at my like water, hydrogen, volatile elements, to try to understand better how the moon is formed.
The team will also compare this fragment with other lunar samples to map the moon's interior and reconstruct its volcanic timeline, data that could refine future lunar missions.
This rare handover isn't just about science. It signals growing collaboration between China and Europe when it comes to space exploration. Now, by handing over this very precious sample, China is showing that it's a major player in lunar science and diplomacy.
For France, it's a scientific win and a chance to make discoveries that could shape the future of planetary science.
I think because China and France, right now they have a very good connection and relationship between the two countries. So it is a good opportunity for our students to do such a research.
And while this type of exchange between China and France is a first, Professor Monnier hopes it's just the beginning of a long and prosperous relationship as the world prepares for a new space race, one built on collaboration rather than competition. Sarah Coates, CGTN, Paris.
China's space agency has released a plan to support commercial space firms and encourage them to pursue international cooperation over the next 2 years. The document from the China National Space Administration invites the country's commercial space enterprises to go global and to help developing countries to build satellite application industries. The CNSA also has pledged to include commercial space projects in China's international cooperation agenda. China now has more than 600 commercial space companies. The recommendations for the country's 15th five-year plan, due to get underway in 2026, lists the aerospace sector among strategic emerging industries. The space agency's plan aims to achieve the high-quality development of commercial space by 2027. Here's more from CGTN's Wang Hao.
Private enterprises have emerged as key players in China's space sector, driven by supportive government policies and institutional backing. The China National Space Administration has established a new department for commercial space operations to bolster this growth. It is the first government body of its kind focusing exclusively on commercial space activities. The administration has also released an action plan outlining key tasks by the end of 2027, aimed at fostering high-quality development in the commercial space industry. The plan integrates commercial space initiatives into the national space strategy and specifies 22 measures across 5 priority areas. It is targeted at enhancing innovation, optimizing resource allocation, promoting the usage of commercial space products, improving regulatory services, and strengthening safety oversight. Wang Hao, CGTN.
The Hainan Commercial Space Launch Site is China's first such facility dedicated to commercial space missions. Since 2016, 43 major missions have launched from the site, including lunar exploration missions and China's first interplanetary probe. The low-altitude location in Wenchang increases rocket payload capacity by 10 to 15%. Another advantage is the Hainan Free Trade Port's zero tariffs and low taxes, which have made the region highly attractive to aerospace enterprises. The space program is also driving a wave of tourism in Hainan. Rocket launches attract large crowds, and rocket chasing has become a new travel trend. The Wenchang Yangguang rocket viewing platform enhances the experience through science education displays, exhibitions, performances, interactive activities, as well as local cuisine. Northwestern China's Xi'an city plays a pivotal role in China's development of space science and applications. The historical city has transformed into an aerospace hub, helping to fuel China's space ambitions. Zheng Yibing reports.
Xi'an, an aviation and aerospace manufacturing base, is a good place to see the progress being made in China's commercial space industry. Let's start with the satellite companies there.
One satellite can play an important role, but the networking of satellites is no doubt very powerful.
This company is building a satellite constellation that will be used for environmental protection in the Qinling mountain area just south of Xi'an.
It's the range that divides North China from the south.
The company plans to manufacture more than 100 remote sensing satellites in the next 5 years.
This is a real-size model for the second phase of this constellation, which is based on a standardized design, fast upgrading, and low-cost operation. It weighs about 50 kilograms. We plan to have 20 of them in orbit before 2025, some 58 by 2028, and about 150 by 2030.
Another Xi'an-based company has been focusing on CubeSat, a microsatellite weighing as little as 1 kilogram.
It has distinct advantages because it's small and flexible and could be sent into space easily. There are examples of one rocket with more than 100 CubeSats on board. It's impossible for big satellites. We spend tens of thousands of yuan to send 1 kilogram of payload into space. So there's a big cost difference between the ones with weights of a ton or 10 kilograms.
The scientists said due to their size, CubeSats only have one function, like photography, for example, but in combination they can perform multiple tasks. The low-orbit constellation uses low-cost and high-efficiency rockets. New rocket engine companies have also emerged in Xi'an. This one provides support to both national missions and commercial operations. It developed the YF-102 engine, which was used to power the first Chinese-made commercial liquid-fuel rocket to reach orbit last year.
Now we know more about the market. We keep upgrading the engines. The YF-102 is not only based on our experiences, but also innovations, lower costs, and technologies that better meet the market needs. And the engines must have high cost performance. This will make rockets more competitive.
For commercial satellites in space, this place is really important. The ground facilities are doing the measurement and control over them.
We established a channel to receive the telemetry data from satellites in orbit and send commands to keep them working normally. This is a constant process, especially in the future when there will be a big increase in satellites.
After almost a decade of development, China's commercial space industry is set to be bracing for the next big step. Xi'an, for decades an aerospace manufacturing hub, is pushing the boundaries of innovation in China's commercial space sector. Zheng Yibing, CGTN in Xi'an, Shanxi Province.
And China's rural network has met its development targets a year ahead of schedule. During the current 5-year plan period, which concludes this year, the country invested approximately 2 trillion yuan, or about $280 billion into this priority initiative. As of the end of last year, the total length of rural roads increased by 6% compared to the end of the previous planning period. And this expansion means nearly 95% of major villages are now connected by paved roads, and close to 90% of small towns have access to the National Territory Road Network. As part of China's 15th five-year plan, which spans from 2026 to 2030, rural revitalization is not just about improving infrastructure. It is now about transforming rural communities into vibrant hubs. Beigou Village, located near the iconic Mutianyu section of the Great Wall, is an example of this transformation. Our reporter Zhu is there.
We are now here in Beigou Village, Huaizhou, in the suburbs area of Beijing. Well, this place used to be a small mountain village where people mainly relied on growing chestnuts, but now it is called the Great Wall International Cultural Village. How did that happen? Let's go find out the answer.
Beigou Village sits right at the foot of the Mutianyu section of the Great Wall. This Brickyard Hotel is the first registered hotel here.
You can enjoy the view of the Great Wall right in this hotel room.
This building was once a glazed tile factory. You can see the traditional 5-pitch roof and ridge beasts, symbols of good fortune. The glazed tiles on the ground and throughout the building were all part of the village's own construction efforts. This area was once an old cave dwelling.
Since this hotel was established, it has helped the local homestay business grow rapidly. Many villagers have renovated their courtyards into homestays or rented them out to people from the city, including many foreigners who have even decided to settle here.
今年增加到40%。
About 40% of the residents are foreigners, mostly from Europe and the US. They visit the Great Wall and then come here to enjoy the beautiful environment and international cuisine. This has boosted local consumption.
Thanks to the growth of the homestay and tourism industry, Beigou Village has created many local jobs.
I used to work in Dali, Yunnan, for a few years, and I loved the natural atmosphere. Now, I see how Beigou Village has rapidly developed into a popular tourist destination. It's great for young people like me, who enjoy a slower pace of life.
In the future, they are even planning to introduce an AI village secretary.
We are developing a big AI system that'll have an AI village secretary. This will allow tourists to learn about Beigou in different languages. It will also connect to a healthcare model, so villagers can get basic medical advice through AI.
This village has also established the Beigou Model Research Institute, which welcomes thousands of visitors each year to explore how to drive rural vitalization. So far, Beigou Village has 24 homestays and 2 hotels. Last year, it attracted over 40,000 visits from tourists, with a total income of over $100,000 US. Zhu, CGTN, Beigou Village, Beijing.
And you're watching Global Business on CGTN. Still to come on the program. Economic signals. We'll take a closer look at U.S. Thanksgiving holiday retail data, which is a key economic barometer.
Hainan writes a new chapter in China's modernization with the launch of special customs operations from December 18th, increasing tax-free tariff lines from 21% to 74%, ensuring the free cross-border flow of goods, people, and capital. Hainan is China's firm commitment to high standard opening up, to advance economic globalization and share opportunities for prosperity with the world. Join us for our special coverage of this historic milestone in Hainan's journey and China's continuing trade liberalization. Only on CGTN.
Time now to get a check on some other important business headlines from around the world. China's Ningbo Zhoushan port has become the world's 3rd port to record annual container throughput exceeding 40 million 20-foot equivalent units. As China's 2nd port to achieve this milestone, it has expanded its goal reach with more than 300 shipping routes and rising export volumes in machinery and new energy vehicles. In the meantime, Eurozone inflation rose slightly to 2.2% in November, remaining close to the European Central Bank's target. Now, the figures reinforce market expectations that the ECB will maintain current interest rates. And also, separately, Airbus CEO Faury stated that the plane maker has turned a corner after recalling thousands of jets for a software update. He described the global operation as unprecedented, but also noted that the emergency update was complete faster than expected. Shifting gears to Japan. Japan's consumer confidence improved for a 4th consecutive month in November. That is according to official data released on Tuesday, although concerns about persistent inflation continue to temper household outlooks. The country's consumer confidence index rose to 37.5 last month, exceeding market forecasts. However, the survey indicated that rising living costs remain a key challenge, with 90.6% of respondents expecting prices to increase in the coming period. Now, that figure, while still high, reflected a slight decline of 2 percentage points from October. And yields on Japan's long-term treasury bonds have retreated slightly after hitting record levels on Monday, though they remain at elevated levels amid investor concerns of the country's economic outlook. For example, the yield on 30-year ultra-long bonds is close to its peak of 3.4%, while the 10-year yield is still above 1.8%. The sell-off in short-term bonds accelerated on Tuesday, with yields on 1-month and 2-month notes also on the climb. The recent market volatility has been partly driven by the Bank of Japan's governor's earlier hints at future rate hikes. Some analysts believe that the government's recent approval of a supplementary budget proposal, which accelerates defense spending to an unprecedented 2% of the GDP, also has sparked concerns. Over 40% of scheduled flights from China to Japan in December have been cancelled, and that's about 1,900 flights. Chinese cruise operator Adora has adjusted its December itinerary to bypass several Japanese ports. It has also cancelled all Japanese port calls for the first quarter of 2026. And recently, businesses across Japan have reported a significant drop in Chinese tourists, with group tours cancelled and revenue declining. Industry insiders warn that if the situation persists through the Spring Festival holiday in February, the impact could escalate further.
Ever since our hotel opened in 2018, we have relied heavily on guests from China. Even before gaining domestic recognition, Chinese visitors made up 20 to 30% of our customer base. The recent wave of cancellations is deeply concerning. For Okinawa's tourism industry, both group and individual travelers from China were highly anticipated. The current situation is really worrying.
Cruise tourism is vital for Okinawa. Our biggest concern is that if this continues into January and February next year, the impact could reach tens of thousands of people. These months are traditionally off-season here, and Chinese tourists are especially important to us during this period. If they stop coming, the blow to our business will be severe.
The United States has exempted British pharmaceuticals from import tariffs following a unique bilateral agreement. Under the deal, the UK will raise the net price it pays for new medicines by 25%. Now, this addresses what US officials described as long-standing trade imbalances where American patients subsidized drugs abroad. The exemption spares the UK from 15% tariffs imposed on October the 1st that still applies to the EU and Switzerland. UK government says that the deal will protect the country's pharmaceutical industry and cement its place as world leader for life science investment. In a separate press release, the U.S. Trade Representative Office says that the Trump administration is encouraging other trade partners to pursue similar negotiations. Retail data from this Thanksgiving holiday, which is regarded as a barometer of U.S. consumption, has drawn great attention amid U.S. policy measures affecting the country's economy. Now, some new trends emerged during this year's shopping season as e-commerce saw a significant increase. Here's more from Mitch McCain.
As you've just heard Siobhan talk about, and one of the interesting things I think she had to say is what we heard from people on the street as well this year. There are economic concerns, particularly around tariffs, around slowing job growth as well. And what people told us is that they were still willing to spend money, but they wanted to spend money on more or larger items, rather than many items. We spoke to one man on Friday. He was buying a handbag with his wife, and it was an expensive one. And he said we'd rather spend money on one big expensive purchase this year rather than 12 lower cost items. So I think that's something we've seen across the board as well. Retailers are doing well, particularly retailers that sell jewellery and apparel, that we've seen large rises there over the last 3 days. But really what Siobhan pointed to is retailers online have done very well. Customers spent around $11.8 billion on online purchases on Friday. That's around a 9% increase on last year. And another set of data shows that in-store sales are up as well, 1.7%. And I think one of the things we considered on Friday before Black Friday, or as it was getting off to a start, was whether or not people were actually going to go in store. Of course, it's getting very cold here in the US, as well as those economic concerns. But as we've seen, people are willing to shop up a storm as well. And Cyber Monday, it's been estimated that shoppers will spend around $14 billion today, a $6.3 billion increase on last year. So despite the cold, despite the economic concerns, people are still looking for bargains.
Now, shifting gears to the African continent, Africa is now pushing towards a faster, cheaper, and more connected trade system. The Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, which is known as the PAPS, now allows businesses across the continent's free trade area and member states to settle payments in their own currencies. Now, that cuts out costly delays and dollar conversions. Here's more from Kelechi Imekalam.
Barbara Amodu launched her luxury wig business in 2020 with most of her customers in Ghana, Senegal and South Africa. But receiving payments often took days, slowing down deliveries and affecting turnover sales. Now she uses Remitano, a fintech platform that settles cross-border transfers almost instantly. With quicker confirmations, she ships faster and expands her African customer base.
Everything is now ASAP. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, I can send to my supplier. My clients can also send money to me just ASAP. It's no longer taking time like before.
Fintechs are stepping into this space in full force. Brand Drive, founded by Ndu Ekwomadu, provides SMEs with end-to-end digital payment tools. In just 2 months, the platform has processed more than 2,000 cross-border payments within the AFCFTA area, reducing transaction times from days to near real time.
We're looking at 5 to almost 10-15% of this transactional fees cupped down to always somewhere around 0.5 to a maximum of about 1.5 to 2%. What that does is it puts more, because the difference between that 5% and maybe a 2% is literally profit for that business.
High transfer charges still cost Africa an estimated $5 billion every year, and the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, or PAPS, aims to close that gap. Under the system, buyers pay in their home currency while sellers receive payments in theirs, creating a seamless continent-wide trading environment. But growth comes with new risks: cyber fraud, inconsistent policies, and fragmented regulations threatening the momentum of digital trade. Fintechs like Brand Drive are now building AI-based security tools to prevent fraud, yet experts say harmonized rules remain essential. As adoption rises, African governments are racing to update their digital payment laws. Coordinate oversight, along with reliable infrastructure, is what analysts say will determine how far systems like PAPS can scale across the continent. PAPS has expanded to 19 countries, with more than 22 Nigerian banks already on board. For traders like Barbara, quicker payments mean faster deliveries, higher profits, and a bigger continental customer base. For AFCFTA, it's a crucial step towards an integrated African market, one where digital payments could become the new backbone of intra-Africa trade. Kelechi Imekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
And with that, I'm wrapping up this edition of Global Business on CGTN. Please follow us on social media platforms, including Facebook, X, and YouTube. Also, Global Business is available on major podcast platforms. I'm Lily in Beijing. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.
Hello and welcome to the Hub on CGTN. I'm Huang Jiyuan in Beijing. This year marks the 50th anniversary of diplomatic relations between China and the European Union, a milestone that reflects 5 decades of growing economic, cultural, and political exchange. As the world faces increasing challenges, from global governance and regional security to climate change and food security, international cooperation has never been more important. How can nations work together to build sustainable partnerships that transcend geopolitical tensions and promote long-term mutual benefits? How can we ensure that global challenges are addressed through collaboration rather than confrontation? To delve deeper into these questions, we are honored to talk to Grzegorz Kolotko, former Deputy Prime Minister of Poland and distinguished professor at Beijing Normal University's Belt and Road School. Professor, thank you for joining us on the program. As you know, this year marks the 50th anniversary of China-Europe relations. And given your experience of working both in academia and in politics in Europe, how do you assess the current China-Europe relations?
Far from perfect, but not as bad as, for instance, the US-China relations. Basically, the critical issue, from my perspective, is the economic cooperation. But the problem is that the European Union is only a union by name. So there are some internal contradictions between the countries, the states of the European Union. And for that reason, I think to coordinate the policy from Brussels' perspective towards China is a little bit more complex than the other way around. But my general evaluation is a positive one. It is visible if we take a look into the amount of trade, export, import, both directions, transfer of technology, but also cultural exchange. So I think expect much more than we have accomplished so far, but definitely the world has changed during these 50 years of Chinese-European cooperation for better. Much more could be accomplished if not the policy mistakes, especially on the European side. So I'm looking into the future with some optimism.
Since you mentioned the European Union in Brussels, I want to ask, because I've read a theory a lot. It says there's a duality in China-Europe relations where on the European Union level, the two sides seems not to be doing so good. But on a country-to-country basis, China-Europe relations is pretty strong. So what's your take on that?
There are the countries so small as Malta or Luxembourg, about 400, less than 500,000 of people. Small countries like Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and then there are the very big countries, which are by very nature much more influential. Basically, this is Germany, France, but also Italy and Spain, and then my country, Poland. So therefore, the relative strength of a particular member of the European Union for the overall policies of the European Union, including relation, cooperation, arguing, etc., with China, is a different one. And then you can go from point to point to point and study which country, which is the member of the European Union, is more engaged in economic, cultural, technological, capital exchange with China. So there are the countries which are more engaged in this exchange, and therefore they are trying to make an impact upon the other countries and the European Union as such, to go farther, deeper, stronger into this cooperation. So from this perspective, we are so-called European Union, but the overall relations between EU and China depends very much on what is like the attitude in Germany, in France, in Italy, in Poland. The more these countries are in favor of enlarging and deepening the Chinese-European cooperation, the better, I think, for each and every country which is involved.
Some argue that there is a strategic hesitation in the current China-Europe relations. Do you think what you've just said contribute to that hesitation? And where does that come from?
The things happen the way because many things happen at the same time. There are some internal processes, there are some international environment, and there's also some pressure from outside. You can bet that the United States, and especially under the second Trump administration, it's not very much in favor of deepening cooperation between anybody and China, including the European Union. So I can see it also from the perspective of my country, that there are different means of American pressure not to go farther with developing relations with China. So the US is intervening with the country's policies vis-à-vis China in Latin America, in Southeast Asia, but also in the European Union. And then we go to square one. It depends on the interest. China is very competitive and depends in what sector of the economy one is involved as a worker, employee, or employer, businessman. Some of them, they are taking cream of cooperation with China, and some of them, they pay the cost because they are not able to stand the competitiveness of China's industries, especially manufacturing. So for that reason, if one will say engage in motor car industry in Poland or Slovakia or Spain, it's hardly very sympathetic towards deepening cooperation with China, because China is now a strong competitor, especially on the field of electrical vehicles. And some of the people over there, yes, some of them, they lost the job. You cannot expect from them to be pro-Chinese, especially since they are told that you have lost the job, not because of the wrong domestic policy, because of competition from China, and they are being also fed by the misinformation that this Chinese competition is unfair. And these problems which we have with economic growth, income, employment, restructuring, are being exploited for the reason of domestic political fight. And some simply are just using this xenophobic instrument as the instrument, their means to their political ends. So this is a complex issue. There is not just one reason, one factor. It is a combination, because one more time the things happen the way they do, because many things happen at the same time.
Some people could argue that the business interest is not powerful enough, at least in the current stage, to overcome the populist rise. So do you think that's true? How do you think that's going to impact the relationship between the two sides?
I would say that good politics is to take into account the expectations, the abilities, the ambitions of the business, but there's a difference. Business of business is business. Business of politics is to keep social balance, to take care of well-being, of three equilibrium development, not only the economic one, but social on the one hand and ecological on the one hand. And sometimes there are the contradictions. But now when I'm taking a look, what are the roots, what are the mechanisms, and what are the consequences of the contemporary trade war, which again has started, was initiated by the United States against China, because the American economy is not capable to stay firm on Chinese growing competitiveness. The business is in favor of continuing this economic cooperation. Pretty often I hear that this is the end of globalization, at least the end of globalization as we know it. I do not share this viewpoint. There is a turbulence, there is the restructuring, redesigning of globalization. I hope towards what you call in China win-win, that is inclusive globalization. And here, if you are taking a look at what side in this struggle for future of globalization, for making it more inclusive, is business, both in Europe, in China, elsewhere. Business is on the side of continuing globalization because it is good in the long run for business. Again, not for each sector, not at every moment of time, not in each country and region, but in general. For that reason, I think that the business people, the managers, the investors, the financiers, by and large, they are in favor of continuation of globalization and enhancing the economic cooperation. But sometimes they act against because of taking care of their own concern, of their own business.
The French President, Emmanuel Macron, is going to visit China starting December 3rd. It will be a 3-day visit. Looking ahead, how do you think his visit could impact the China-Europe relations at this moment?
Very much. I would say it's critical. As I said before, the European Union is a union of 27 countries of different size. France, together with Germany, is the core of the European Union. And my personal view is that as far as the leaders of the countries of the European Union are concerned, the most progressive is Emmanuel Macron. I do remember his previous visit to China when he met with Chinese leader President Xi Jinping a couple of years ago. He was, and he is, so powerful that at that time he invited to accompany him the chairwoman of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. This visit of President Macron has contributed not only to the bilateral cooperation between France and China, but also in getting momentum for improvement of the relations between whole European Union and China. And now the geopolitical situation to which you have referred is more challenging, is more complex because of very many issues. And from that reason, the political dimension of President Macron's visit will be, I think, is more important now than a couple of years ago, and my expectations are positive. I'm looking also for the feedback exposed after Macron meeting Chinese leaders. President Xi Jinping, Prime Minister Li Qiang will return to France. Definitely, he will brief the other European leaders. Triangle, London, Berlin, Paris is critical for all the European political and economic theater, also vis-à-vis relations with China. So do expect some good news from the visit of President Macron to Beijing, and we should support, the deepening of the cooperation between China and France, because it is also good for the cooperation between the whole European Union and China.
As a country, Poland, that has been deeply impacted by the Second World War, how important it is for China and Japan and perhaps the world to uphold the post-war structure to promote peace?
It's extremely important. We are from different parts of the world. But as you mentioned, 80 years ago, what was over, that was the World War. We are in one world. We are Europe, you are Asia. But the tensions which do happen in one place and another place, somehow there are feedback, they are linked. I think that what is now going on here in China, the reaction for ill-advised comment of Prime Minister of Japan, Mrs. Taikachi, it's something what you may compare between the relations between Poland and Russia. 80 years ago, the Soviet army was fighting the German Nazis, moving, all the way to Berlin, and same as China, arm with America, was fighting the Japanese militarism, and Taiwan was occupied by Japan till 1945, till the end of the war, same as Poland was occupied by the German Nazis. And it has changed here with the assistance of US, in Poland with the assistance of the then Soviet Union and Russia. Now the situation has changed completely. Now Japan is in line of the United States, and the United States is pretty often pointing to China as a kind of foe of enemy. We see differently the case in Europe, and now we have improved our relations with Germany, which we were fighting 85 years ago. But the relations between Poland and Germany now are also far from perfect. There are some political tensions, even more political than the economic one. So for that reason, I think that, one more time, it is good to listen to men of state like President Xi Jinping and to ask us, and then in Japan, in Germany, in Russia, in Poland, in China, What it is, global initiative for peace, global governance initiative, global cultural initiative. This global initiative of President Xi Jinping are pointing to the direction, if not of the solutions, at least for a dialogue, negotiations, how to improve the things. Now the question is coming to the fore. In whose favor raising of the temperature of Cold War is? Almost 40% of hundreds of billions of weapons to which President Trump is referring as wonderful American weapons. Almost 40% is US export. You know how much, for instance, is from China? Less than 6%. So who is fueling this Cold War atmosphere? And from this perspective, you have to see also this unwise comment by Prime Minister Takaichi about Taiwan. So there is a part of business and there is a part of political class quite influential, which is in favor of enhancing the intensity of this Cold War because it is profitable for them. But it is very costly for us, for the people which simply would prefer to live in a stable solution.
Now, what do you think Takaichi should do to reconcile her relationship, the Japanese relationship with China, given her remarks over Taiwan?
Well, I would say that it is non-leader, including Mrs. Takaichi, is geography. It's history. She will not be that long the Prime Minister of Japan. It's not my cup of tea to make a judgment to this end, but what I'm here and there, even some former Prime Ministers of Japan are very critical for what she has said. They are saying that she was committing a mistake, serious mistake, making such an unwise comment. So I wouldn't say that what Mrs. Takaichi said is overall Japanese attitude. I know also a little bit Japan, maybe not as good as China, and I think that most of the Japanese people, they are not accepting this kind of narrative which was expressed by the current Prime Minister.
Because some of the comments that I've read on the internet is that many people don't understand why the question over Taiwan is such a big deal. Can you explain to them how important is the Taiwan question to China and to the post-Second World War order?
One point is that we, the people of academia, intellectuals, we have to make our voice heard. What is the truth? How the history has evolved? Who was an invader? Who was fighting for what reason? And how the situation looked. And for that purpose, I'm afraid that in the lion's share of the world, there is not a full understanding why the Taiwan question is so critical, so important for China. The Taiwan question is being used as an instrument for the political fight within the world. More often than not, they listen, they hear in the US, in Western Europe, that China is a potential aggressor for Taiwan and you do not have any rights to Taiwan. It's a different narrative. And it is going without further deeper explanation. Very many people, they are not aware even of the fact that Taiwan was occupied and in a very nasty, brutal way by Japan since the end of 19th century till 1945. And at that time, we both, America, West, were fighting with Japan also for getting Taiwan back to China.
Since you mentioned the United States several times, how would you assess the China-US relationship right now? Because a lot of things have happened in 2025.
US-China's relations are absolutely critical for the whole world. This is the relation between two most powerful countries, which are competing vis-a-vis economic mighty, but also critical for the future development technologies. But also, what is very important, China and US is also competing for influence, including economic one and to the extent political one, in so-called global south. I can tell you the story. I'm here in Beijing this time for teaching my students international MBA program at the famous Beijing Normal University. There is 88 students from 43 countries, mostly from Asia and Middle East and Africa. And it is very interesting because my class is on geopolitical changes and the influence upon economic development. So I'm explaining also to my international students here in China how this competition between US and China is making an impact of their chances, prospects for economic development. So one must see the rivalry between China and US, not only as who is stronger, etc., but also who has more to gain or to offer to the other parts of the world. My second point is that, of course, I see these relations negative, and especially because of the current American administration. They declared trade war against China, and they are losing this trade war. The U.S. has not the ability to conquer, to defeat China as far as trade war is concerned. How unwise it is to start the war which you cannot win. It was obvious for professionals, for technocrats, for common sense people that the U.S. is not able to win the trade war with China. Is China winning the trade war? Well, it depends what you mean by winning, but definitely it is less costly for China than it will be costly for the United States.
Let's turn the conversation to China now. So next year, China will unveil its 15th five-year plan. Since your work here in China and both on the international stage, what do you look for in this 15th five-year plan the most? What priorities or key structural transformations do you expect?
Domestically, I think it is critical to shift the driving force for economic growth from investment and export to consumption. During the 55 years plan, 2026-2030, favorable toward this restructuring from investment to consumption, the better for sustaining economic growth. I think it is still feasible to stay the course of plus minus 5% rate of growth annually on the average during next 5 years in terms of GDP. On the international scale, where China will be not weaker, China will be stronger but in a different way, and I think it's a factor which is contributing to the peaceful development of the world, which is not seen always in this same way by some policymakers in the West.
Since you work in the Belt and Road School at the Beijing Normal University, I want to ask you, where do you see as the most significant or the most underappreciated factor of the BRI that could shape globalization in the future?
I'm positive about Belt and Road Initiative. You know, after all, during this 12-13 years of Belt and Road Initiative, which was launched about 2012, China has invested directly in the remaining part of the world, something in an order of $1.3 billion. Several dozen of millions of people are not unemployed. They got a job because of the Belt and Road Initiative. And there is another question which nobody is asking. Because of this reason, how many million less of people emigrated from South Asia, Middle East and Africa to Europe, or from Latin America to North America? China came first with this bold infrastructure investment and economic assistance project towards Global South or developing countries. And only then, exposed afterwards, there was the response of the United States with their program, and there was the response of the European Union with our program, European gateway, which is much smaller than the Belt and Road Initiative. So we see also a kind of competition between China, the European Union, and the United States vis-à-vis investing, coming, engaging with economic cooperation, infrastructure investment with the countries of Global South, which is a positive factor for development of this very positive South. The more that type of rivalry, that type of competition is, the better. That is the good recipe for the future, not, the military competition.
Since you mentioned Africa in your answer, I want this to be my last question. So this year's G20 is held in Africa. It's the first time in history that it's held on the African continent, and it placed food security as a key issue, as a priority in the discussion. So at this time of geopolitical uncertainty and tension, how should the world work together to address this issue, the African food security issue, and what's China's role in supporting Africa?
I think that as far as food security is concerned, not that much depends on China, yet of course China, being so mighty economy now, can assist the improvement of situation to this end also. But if you are asking about G20 and now geopolitical situation, it's a very big time. It's a very big time because take a look what has happened. United States has cut foreign assistance allocation for U.S. aid under the Trump administration this year by 83% to shift billions of dollars from economic assistance for the poor countries, including also food assistance for African people, where plenty are in malnutrition or even in hunger, for military expenses. The same is going in Europe, also in countries like UK or France, even Macron, France, Germany, in Poland. Shame for my government. We have decreased the foreign assistance for the poorest countries, including Africa and elsewhere, because we need more money, do we, for military expenses. You cannot spend the money twice. And that is the very wrong direction. We have to stop this crazy military build-up, this military race, to have enough money to improve the standard of living of our people, but also to assist the people of Global South, especially in the region where they are not able to meet the ends themselves. There is a good future for continuation of the globalization, presuming it will be more inclusive, it will be more win-win, as you like to say in China. It is possible, it is difficult, but we can go into this direction. Again, one more time, before the situation will start to improve, it will deteriorate. And here I put some trust in China's global initiatives as an important factor which will contribute, shift towards this inclusive globalization.
Well, Professor, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
That's all for this edition of The Hub. Thank you for tuning in, and bye for now.
from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Jamie Owen. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories. The White House says it's very optimistic ahead of the United States-Russia meeting on Ukraine. Our other headlines, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi arrives in Moscow for talks with his counterpart to strengthen security ties. The death toll from flooding across South and Southeast Asia passes 1,300 and is expected to rise. And French President Macron looks to further trade ties with China as he heads to Beijing for a fourth state visit. President Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff is in Moscow, where he's due to speak to the Russian leader Vladimir Putin about Ukraine. This follows talks between the United States and Kyiv, which both sides described as productive. The talks come hours after Russia launched more deadly attacks, with officials claiming they've captured a key strategic city, which Ukraine denies. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent Dasha Chernyshova in Moscow. Dasha, what does Russia hope to achieve from these talks?
Well, we are now getting the pictures of Steve Witkoff, U.S. envoy, and Jared Kushner, U.S. President Donald Trump's son-in-law, being in the Russian capital, taking a walk with the head of Russia's direct investment fund, Kirill Dmitriev. And we understand that the negotiations with the Russian president are about to begin. And in these negotiations, obviously, Moscow is looking to see what sort of amendments have been made to the U.S. devised plan on the Ukrainian settlements after the negotiations between Kyiv and Washington officials. Moscow will be looking for making sure that its red lines are well taken into account, and Russia says it is open for the negotiations. However, we have been receiving the signals from the Russian officials, the Russian Foreign Ministry, Russian State Duma lawmakers, all suggesting that Russia should not be barging, it should not be making compromises that would make Russia more vulnerable. What Russia has started in its so-called special military operation in Ukraine should be achieved, and the Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov has most recently been saying that Moscow will be looking to make sure that its goals of the operation are well taken into account when that deal is made. And obviously Moscow is seeking to make sure that this deal is internationally recognized. Without it, officials here say that will be null and void.
Okay, well, that's the diplomatic negotiation. In terms of the military action, what's the latest on the fighting?
Well, we have seen the pictures of Russian presidents traveling to the front lines just ahead of these negotiations in Moscow, and Putin wearing military uniform was shown to be at an advanced command post in the area of the special military operation, where he was briefed by the army generals about their advances on the battlefield. The key moment here is obviously the capture of Pokrovsk, which is in the Donetsk People's Republic. Russia now controls this point, and Moscow says that will be opening for Russia more horizons for further actions on this direction. We're also hearing about the city of Volchansk being under the control of the Russian military. Now 100% of it have come under the control. Also Gulay-Polye, and Moscow says it is making gains on other directions as well. So the idea that Russia is trying to position here is that, be it through diplomacy or through military means, Moscow will be seeking to achieve the goals of its military operation in Ukraine.
Dasha, thank you for that. Our correspondent Dasha Chernyshova in Moscow. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent Evangelo Sipsas, who's in Kyiv. Evangelo, what's Kyiv saying about Russia's claim of completely taking Pokrovsk?
Well, Kyiv is denying that Russia has taken all of the city of Pokrovsk, actually. And what they're saying is that they're pushing back on the lines. They're pushing back in those claims that the Ukrainian troops are in the front line, that they're holding their positions, and they'll be able to keep that live stream of sources coming in from the west of the country to be able to help those that are in the front line. But of course, they do say that they're under heavy shelling. They do say that it is a very difficult situation. It's not easy for them on the front line. But they say that that the Russians haven't controlled the whole territory of Pokrovsk. They're saying that parts of it are still open, especially in the northern part of the city. Now, as they're saying, the Russians are claiming that they have controlled the whole city of Pokrovsk. We have those images on social media with the Russian flags in the center of Pokrovsk. With them saying that they have control of it, and Kiev is saying that those only images that are circulating on social media, the only thing that it's doing is trying to put pressure on the negotiations on the peace talks, especially now that Steve Witkoff is in Moscow. That's what they're claiming. So Kiev is saying that they haven't taken control, that the only thing that Russia is achieving right now is putting pressure on those negotiation talks.
President Zelensky continuing his diplomatic trips around Europe, making his first official visit to Ireland.
Well, it's his first official visit, as you mentioned, in Ireland. He will be meeting Catherine Connolly, the president of Ireland. He'll also meet the Prime Minister of Ireland, Taoiseach Michael Martin. And it's very important here because Zelensky and Ukraine is there not to only continue the support from its European counterparts, but to establish a long-term support from its European counterpart. So what does that mean? A financial support that would help them rebuild and reconstruct Ukraine in case of peace prevails. And that's why there will be a meeting, economic forum between Ukraine and Ireland to discuss the potential reconstruction of Ukraine the day after the peace happens and the day after fighting ends. But what he will be getting out of this meeting is $125 million, 100 of it in non-lethal weapons towards Ukraine, but $25 million to be able to put it towards its energy system, because winter is coming and its infrastructure system and energy system has been hit quite hardly.
Evangelo, thank you very much. Our correspondent Evangelo Sipsas reporting there from Kyiv, and as Evangelo was just mentioning, that's President Zelensky there, and the Irish Prime Minister holding a press conference in Ireland. Maybe we'll just dip in for a moment and just listen to a few words.
President Zelensky, as a country with a long history of migration of our own, as a people that at times in our history have known conflict and have sought refuge and opportunity abroad, as a people who have seen peace come and our country transformed, know that for as long as Ukraine needs our help and support, Ireland will be there for you. Your struggle is our struggle. Your success will be our success. We are with you for as long as it takes.
That's Ireland's Prime Minister and Ukraine's President. You're seeing President Zelensky there on another one of his tours around European capitals, garnering support for Ukraine's position. And we might return to that story in Ireland a little later during the course of the next few hours or so. Let's carry on with the rest of today's news, because China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi has just ended his meeting with his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov in Moscow. Earlier he met Russia's security chief Sergei Shoigu, who emphasized his country's support for the One China principle and condemned Japan's latest remarks about Taiwan. Well, our correspondent Li Jianhua has been following the story. This meeting between Wang Yi and Sergei Shoigu, any idea what was discussed yet?
So, you know, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi today met two top officials from Russia, and those meetings were held behind closed doors. So there is no way that we can get access to some of the details until we have the media read out today in the afternoon. But according to the military news outlet Zvezda from Russia, it said that the parties will discuss the situation in the Asia-Pacific region, cooperation in the military and military technical spheres, and interaction between law enforcement agencies and special services. So this is basically what we know so far at this point before we can know more about the media readout later. But what about this mechanism? It's a regular mechanism between China and Moscow. The consultations have been considered rather a platform for strategic and overarching issues, including security, global affairs, and cooperation in multilateral institutions. It can go back to 2005, so it has a history of about 20 years already, and it's one of the highest level security dialogues that China conducts with any country. Back in 2005, the China and Russia wanted a formal and regular channel to coordinate on major security issues when the United States was expanding rapidly. And this meeting today is the timing is very interesting because we are entering this new phase of the current conflict between Russia and Ukraine. They are trying to figure out how to get out of this current conflict at this point in Europe. And also the tensions between China and Japan have also made the meeting quite interesting. So we just want to find out what they have covered concerning the current Ukraine conflict, the tensions between China and Japan specifically, and also in general between the West and Russia.
There is another significant meeting taking place, of course, Wang having discussions with Sergei Lavrov. What can we expect to come out of that?
We don't know at this point. As I said, that Lavrov's the counterpart of Wang Yi, and they are expected to cover just security issues, the security concerns at this point. And of course, especially on top of the agenda, that is the tensions, as I said just now, between China and Japan, as we have seen that the relations have de-escalated. I think that could be one of the issues that is on top of the agenda. And also, that was the first time that the Japanese Prime Minister said in history, in a formal setting, that the contingency of Taiwan is the contingency of Japan. So that is how the tensions escalate and started. I think that would be one of the issues that they talked about, went into detail. And as you said in the opening just now, and Lavrov or Shoigu also said that they follow the one China principle, and that is what they covered. So let's see what details we can find from the readouts later.
All right, we'll talk to you in an hour or so. For the moment, thank you, Li Jianhua. Our correspondent, Li Jianhua. Hong Kong's chief executive says a judge-led committee will now investigate the city's deadliest fire in decades. At least 156 people were killed when flames tore through 7 towers of a high-rise apartment complex last week. More than a dozen people have been arrested on suspicion of manslaughter. There have also been further arrests as part of a corruption investigation.
We must uncover the truth, ensure that justice is served, let the deceased rest in peace, and provide comfort to the living.
The White House has defended the United States Navy commander's decision to order a second strike on a suspected Venezuelan drug smuggling boat in September, saying he had the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's authorization. This contradicts a statement made by President Trump, who said Hegseth had not given the order. The US media has reported that 2 survivors were clinging onto the boat when the second strike happened, drawing questions over its legality. The Trump administration says it was acting in self-defense. The 2 leading candidates in the Honduran presidential race were effectively tied in the latest vote count on Monday. The conservative candidate, Nasri Asfura, and the liberal Salvador Nasrallah are both on around 40% of the vote. Problems with the results website have prevented any further updates, leading to confusion and rising tension among voters. The death toll from flooding across South and Southeast Asia has now passed 1,300 and is expected to rise. Authorities in Indonesia, Sri Lanka, Malaysia and Thailand are all racing to help victims, but struggling to reach many communities. Indonesia is worst hit, with more than 1 million people moved from their homes and over 700 dead. Many survivors are desperately searching for missing family members, with hundreds unaccounted for.
I've waited far too long. Many other victims have been found, but why haven't my wife and children been found? That's why my friends and I are joining the search for my family. My only hope is that my wife and children can be found soon, and that the government can help in locating them. That is all I pray for.
Well, in Sri Lanka, at least 400 people are now known to have been killed, with the country's president warning that number may still rise. China has said it'll send $1 million in aid and nearly $1.5 million worth of supplies to help the relief efforts. Our correspondent, Pavani Hapuachi, is in Colombo. Pavani, what's the latest on the ground, and do we know whether or not aid is starting to arrive?
Yes, thank you. The situation in Sri Lanka remains very tense. Catastrophic floods and landslides triggered by days of heavy rain owing to Cyclone Ditwa have now displaced more than 1.46 million people. According to our Disaster Management Center, it has confirmed over 410 deaths and several hundred people still reported missing. The district of Kandy in the central province is actually one of the worst hit areas where there's over 80 deaths and 150 people are missing. We have rescue and recovery efforts by the Triforces, Sri Lanka Police and other dedicated relief agencies are continuing, especially in the hard-hit central province. Conditions on the ground is still very difficult because many areas remain cut off due to lack of telecommunication connectivity. Evacuation centers are filling up and there's a growing need for clean water, medical care and things like sanitary essentials as the rain has only ceased intermittently. In fact, our Department of Meteorology today predicted that the northeast monsoon condition is gradually establishing over the country, and we are actually expecting rains again from Friday onwards, particularly in the northern, north central, eastern and Uber as well as the central province. In terms of international assistance, yes, we have positive news. Support has begun to arrive from across the world. The government of China announced today that it will provide Sri Lanka with $1 million in cash, along with the relief items worth 10 million yuan, which also includes life jackets, tents, blankets and bed sheets. According to the China International Development Cooperation Agency, these supplies are to be delivered promptly to help with the ongoing disaster relief operations. In terms of our own Sri Lankans, they have come forward together at community level, within neighborhoods, and even as families, contributing in whichever small ways they could to support the fellow citizens who are in distress. Some have even donated their own rice bag in the kitchen to provide a meal to the people who are at relief centers. For now, the focus remains on search and rescue, restoring access to isolated communities and stabilizing conditions as the government and authorities assess the full scale of damage from Cyclone Ditwa.
Pavani, thank you for that. Our correspondent Pavani Hapuachi in Colombo. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, so no food, water or shelter. The aid agencies struggling to support those flooded communities who've lost everything.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans, grey rhinos, and unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
For China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us.
And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
You might think you are better informed in an information age. The fact is, people are more often misled by misinformation. You might think every voice is heard in a digital world. The fact is, many nations and peoples are still underrepresented. And data poverty shuts out many. We at CGTN are committed to transcending the information gap and the digital divide. CGTN, bridging nations and civilizations. CGTN, see the difference.
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. The White House says it's very optimistic ahead of a United States-Russia meeting on Ukraine. Our other headlines, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi arrives in Moscow for talks with his counterpart to strengthen security ties. And the death toll from the flooding across South and Southeast Asia now passes 1,300 and is expected to rise. Tommaso Della Longa is from the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. Tommaso, welcome back. Good to see you. What are your teams telling you about the situation in particular in Indonesia?
Thank you very much, Jamie, for having me today. Well, the situation is still very complicated. The flooding, the extension of the flooding is huge. Landslides also have affected Indonesia as well, other part of the region. There are severe infrastructural damages, so even access to all the areas is still a challenge. Of course, we are still in the phase of the search and rescue and also bringing first aid, health, food, water, all the basic items that people need to survive.
Looking on, the international community obviously horrified and saddened by what's happened. I wonder, what can the international community do to help?
Well, first and foremost, support the emergency response, but I would say also the recovery for the weeks and months to come. Here we are looking at a region, not only one country or one part of a country. I'm talking about Indonesia, Sri Lanka, Vietnam, Thailand, that will need the help of the international community for the months to come. And also, I think it's a good reminder of the need of improving framework policies, even in an area of the world that is very well placed, for instance, for early warning, a national-based solution, and so on, is in the front line of the climate change. There is a need of strengthen all the different policies and systems to make sure that the next disaster, less people will be badly affected.
I wonder what the most pressing needs are in the coming hours.
Well, surely, again, search and rescue, shelter, so people need to be evacuated, but needs also to have some kind of safety. And then basically all the basic items, which is food, water, and items for houses. And we don't have to forget mental health and psychological support, which is very, very important in the first, to work on it since the first hours after a disaster.
Just how challenging is it to reach those remote communities? I mean, it's clear from the pictures we're seeing that the roads, the railways are underwater.
Extremely challenging. You have to think about, just to give you an example, Sri Lanka, but it could also work for Indonesia. In Sri Lanka, it's one of the worst disaster, in the recent past. We're talking about remote communities that still are almost unreachable, and the more the time will go ahead, the more needs will grow because we'll have a clearer picture of these remote areas. So it's extremely challenging, and I think that what really saved life, as always, I must admit, is the fact that we're stocks prepositioned and volunteers, cross-crescent volunteers that are already trained, part of the community, who immediately react after the flooding, but still we don't have a clear picture of the needs on the ground.
Tommaso, we wish you well in your work. We'll talk again in coming days, I'm sure, but for the moment, thank you. Tommaso Della Longa from the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. China has submitted another letter to the United Nations rejecting what Beijing describes as Japan's unreasonable arguments over Taiwan. Fu Kong wrote that Japan is avoiding key issues while attempting to shift the blame. China's UN ambassador said the cause of tension was recent remarks made by the Japanese Prime Minister concerning Taiwan. French Prime Minister Emmanuel Macron, French President, I should say, Emmanuel Macron heads to Beijing this week for his fourth state visit to China. He's expected to focus on trade, finding ways that firms from both countries can better do business. Our correspondent Sarah Coates reports now from Paris.
President Macron is arriving with a clear ambition to bolster economic ties and deepen cooperation in sectors where French and Chinese interests align, from energy to aviation to luxury goods and innovation. At the heart of the discussions is set to be China's rapid rise in technology and advanced manufacturing, a shift with major consequences for Europe.
So we have seen an increasing upgrading of the Chinese producing system from 20 years ago, only a manufacturing of goods of low quality, to now a dominant capacity on high level, high value chain, producing goods and services. And this, of course, creates challenges for Europe and for France, because we see many private companies that before were dominant on the global scale and now are challenged by some of Chinese private companies, such as in the EVs, for instance.
And French industry is watching closely. China is no longer just a production powerhouse. It's become a global innovator, setting new benchmarks across multiple sectors.
J'aime bien dire à mes étudiants, bon ben voilà, regardez ce que vous avez.
I ask my students to just look around. How many objects on your desks are made in France? Very few. How many are made in China? Almost all of them. We depend on China.
Très pragmatique une nouvelle fois. Aujourd'hui, nous sommes dépendants de la Chine.
A reminder of just how central China's growth has become to France's industrial and consumer landscape. And that growth matters. French industry, from auto to electronics to everyday consumer goods, there's a massive reliance on Chinese supply chains, with the market only continuing to expand. For many in France, deeper cooperation is not only about economics. It's also about long-term diplomacy, cultural exchange, and a recognition of China's growing role on the world stage.
Je pense aujourd'hui qu'il y a une vraie opportunité.
Today, France has a real chance to work with China, especially as cooperation with the United States has become complicated. I see a genuine opportunity to build long-term, cooperative, co-constructed partnerships with China based on mutual understanding.
Avec un préalable, en fait, qui est celui de la compréhension.
As President Macron gets set to meet China's leadership, Paris sees a chance to build momentum, strengthening economic ties, broadening cooperation, and helping shape Europe's next phase of engagement with Beijing. Sarah Coates, CGTN, Paris.
The headlines again. The White House says it's very optimistic ahead of a United States-Russia meeting on Ukraine. Our other headlines: China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi arrives in Moscow for talks with his counterpart to strengthen security ties. And the death toll from the flooding across South and Southeast Asia passes 1,300 and is expected to rise. And that is the world today. Thank you for watching. We're back with more news at the top of this hour. Coming up next, it's World Insight. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.
the view that open trade is the way to go. Europe has a relatively low rate of growth. In Europe, the situation is a little bit more difficult. Growth has been reduced in a number of sectors, and exactly this huge increase in spending on defense from European countries will have an impact in our economies. We have to be much more careful where we invest, and you start seeing that from the investors.
Hello and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian Wei. French President Emmanuel Macron will pay a state visit to China from December 3rd to 5th, as this year marks the 61st anniversary of Sino-French diplomatic relations. The trade partnership between the two countries has gone farther, with recent high-level talks seeking deeper economic and financial cooperation. That means building on collaborations in aerospace, nuclear energy, and green transformation. Recently, I spoke with Pascal Lamy, who served as Director General of the World Trade Organization and also as former Trade Commissioner of the European Commission. He believes there is vast potential for China-EU cooperation, from expanding mutual market access to working together on digital trade, green growth, and tech innovation. We see the world change dramatically, continuing. Now, China-US just reached certain kinds of trade deals. Your take on the content, on the impact?
One of the many episodes, there have been many, there will be many moments of tensions and then moments of relaxation. So I think what we have to look at the medium long-term trend, which unfortunately is an intensification